Today, I want to deal with a subject that I get a lot of questions about from people in church, and that's the issue of cremation. What happens to our physical body at death? As you know, more and more in the modern world, cremation is becoming an option for people. So Christians ask me, is that something that's pleasing to God or something that's against the Bible? Well, let's look at the Bible itself and see if we can come up with an answer. I want to deal with the Old Testament first. There was some burning of people. It's one of four ways to do capital punishment in Israel. And one is Leviticus 20:14, and the other is Leviticus 21:9. Now we have two examples of at least the threat to burn somebody. Remember when Judah took his daughter-in-law sexually? Her name is Tamar, and she got pregnant. And when he found out, he was going to burn her as a judgment. And then, of course, the Joshua 7, which is the conquest of Jericho. And Achan stole some things, and the Israeli army lost the battle the next day. Achan was burned. Now, people friendly with Saul. Remember this story in 1 Samuel 31? Remember, the Philistines found Saul wounded, cut off his head, hung his body from the city gates, the height of unburied shame. Well, his friends from a city that Saul had helped came and got his body down. They burned it, and they took the bones back to bury in Israel. So nothing is bad said about that at all. Burning corpses was a sign of judgment, and I've got two different ones for you. The priest at Bethel, which is one of the sites that is so condemned in northern Israel, Dan and Bethel, is 1 Kings 13:2. A Judean prophet says those priests will be burned on their own altar. Another one is that the foreign invaders of Canaan will be burned and buried. This is a eschatological about an end-time battle, Ezekiel 39:11 through 16. It's also in connection with the plague of judgment in Amos 6:10. And that's a difficult text, but it seems to imply the burning of bodies there. Many people have confused burning of bodies as a way to deal with what possibly could be a disease-causing thing with the imagery for fire as judgment. They say you burn the body, that's a symbol of judgment. But that's not necessarily true because it also is for hygienic purposes. Burial was practiced by all of the countries of the ancient Near East, but not by Greek and Rome. Greek and Rome, they practice it. Greece regularly, Rome not common, but sometimes. Now, cremation is basically within Judaism. The rabbi said we should be buried, and they based that on Deuteronomy 21:23, where it says, after you hang somebody on a tree, bury them. So they would quote that everybody should be buried. But the Talmud itself and the Mishnah both forbid cremation. But you know, since the terrible Holocaust of the Nazis for the Jewish people, they've kind of modified this, and they allow cremated people to be buried in Jewish cemeteries because so many were cremated in those terrible camps in Germany. There is no discussion or mention of this subject in the New Testament. So if it's not something that Jesus talked about or the apostles talked about, I think we have some freedom to make a choice. The physical body is viewed as a temporary shelter. Do you remember 2 Corinthians chapter 5, where Paul described his body as a worn-out tent? Now, Paul was a tent maker or tent repairer. He had fixed many an old tent, and he compares his body wearing out to that of an old tent. Now, there's something to be reunited of the physical with the spiritual. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13 through 18, the only mentions in the Bible about the parousia, says that when Jesus comes back on the clouds of heaven with the angels and the saints, these saints who have previously died are going to get their bodies first. And then those of us who are alive and remain will be caught up in the air with them, that parousia, or snatched up. Now that way, something of what happened here is going to be reunited with the spiritual aspect of us. Now just think for a minute about all the wars we've had, where explosions and people have died and you can't even find their bodies. You can't push this too far. It just won't fit. There is a physicalness to eschatology. The afterlife has a physicalness. Jesus' new body was able to eat fish at the end of John. There's going to be some physicalness to heaven, but we're not told how and when and why. And just one closing point at this. If it's too physical about our heavenly existence, there are billions of believers. We could never get close to Jesus if the physicalness is too literal. How many can be at Jesus' feet if there are billions waiting in line? So be careful you don't wrap around this age and the next age. I think the reason the Bible is so silent on hell and heaven and the future age is because we don't have vocabulary to understand it. We are locked into fallen, human, chronological vocabulary and understanding, and I think heaven is far better than that, far more than that. Well, I hope this is helpful to you. My wife and I have decided that we're going to be cremated because it's so much more inexpensive for our families. I know Jesus, and I'm not worried about where my body, once I've gone to be with him, is. Have a good day.